Our first presenter today is Kristi Sherven. She's from HIA Hospice. She's a care consultant with HIA Hospice. She's from Ryder, North Dakota. She currently resides in Minot. And she started her career as an early childhood educator. She's now entering her 13th year of working with hospice. And today she will share with us a walk in her calling. Kristi?
Testing. Is this one on at all?
I can hear it.
Can you hear this one okay? So, take your pick.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to spend this day with you all. I'm just so happy to be here. As it was said, my name is Kristi Sherven and I work with HIA Hospice. Our name used to be Hospice of the Red River Valley. And once we started to move to the west of Fargo and Grand Forks, we knew that we needed to change our name. We wanted to be very thoughtful of those who we were serving in our communities, and the Red River Valley is not here. So we changed our name last June. It's now HIA Hospice. And one way to remember that is Hearts in Action. That's who we are. As I said, we've had an expansion to the west. Are you hearing me okay out there? Is this working? Okay. We had an expansion to the west, and we're so happy to be in your community serving those that need a little bit of extra support with hospice care. We started our office in Minot in August of 2024, so we're coming up on 2 years, and we are located at Town and Country Shopping Center. If you knew where the diabetes education office was, we took that office over and the diabetes office moved to the hospital. So that's where we are. My title is a care consultant, and that does not mean medical. I am not a nurse, but I'm an educator. And I love going out to the communities that we serve and meeting with all the people in the community and sharing a little bit of education about hospice. There's a lot of misconceptions about hospice, and others might just not know anything about hospice. And I can certainly say that there was a time in my life that I fit in both of those groups. I thought that it was the very end of life when you called hospice. If the patient had 3 days left of life, that's when you called them. I was wrong. That was all I knew. So let me tell you my story. In May 2009, my dad woke up and he had a seizure in his arm. His arm was flailing around, he had no control over it, and my mom took him to the emergency room in Minot. And what they found was something that just crumbled our world. They found a brain tumor. What we did was talked as a family, and our focus was to fight. We were going to do everything that we could to get Dad through this. So we made a visit to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. We were hoping that the tumor would be operable, but it wasn't. So we returned back to Minot with a second plan. Now we were looking at having some radiation, many sessions of radiation, and chemotherapy. What Dad experienced during that time was just breathtaking. It was so emotional to watch the decline that we saw. He was losing weight. He had so much weakness. He slept more. His walking changed from day to day. He started using a cane, and then he went to a walker. Soon he was in a wheelchair, and then next would be bedbound. There was a change in those daily living activities too. Dad was very independent. He was a farmer for years, still drove out to the farm even though he was retired. But there was a definite change in the needs that he had that we helped him with. Getting up in the morning was a challenge for him. You get up, you shower, you brush your teeth, comb your hair, you shave, put your clothes on. That's a lot of work for someone who's not feeling well. Some people also have problems with frequent infections when they're nearing end of life. It's hard to get rid of those bruises that you have or the wounds that you have. Your body just is not healing the way it used to. Some have frequent ER trips. They're hospitalized, and then we hear the words, "There's nothing more we can do." So we had a scan of Dad's brain, and what we heard was that it's not working. Now we need to look at another option, and it's the final option. And the doctor told us about hospice. I was angry when he told me that, because my dad was not on his deathbed. But what I found out was hospice was there to support not only Dad in his time of need, but the whole family. We agreed to let hospice come in to work with us and to help keep Dad at home. He was comfortable in his familiar surroundings and around his family that loved him so much. Hospice is available wherever people call home. We have served people in the residential home, assisted living facility, skilled nursing facility, like a nursing home. We've also been to a camper, a park bench, a hotel. As I said, it's wherever you call home. That's where we go to work with you and your loved one. Hospice also taught us, while they were in our home, how to be caregivers for Dad. I come from a large family. It's myself and 4 older brothers, so we're very lucky to lean on each other and help each other through this time, as well as spending that important time with Dad. What hospice did when they came out into the home is they looked at all the medications that Dad was taking, and they had a conversation with Dad and my family. They talked about certain medications that they felt was important to continue, but then there were also those medications that we could get rid of. That would be like the big vitamin, things like medications like that. What we see when some patients are nearing the end of their journey is that they sometimes have trouble swallowing, and that's for a couple of reasons. It could be because the brain is forgetting how to swallow, and it also could be that those muscles in the neck are getting very weak, and they're not able to swallow as they once were. So it's important to take a look at those medications and only to keep on those that are important. They also were able to educate us about comfort medications. They added those to Dad's daily schedule because there's no reason for anyone who is going through this to be in pain. We wanted him to be comfortable. It was no longer looking for a cure, it was looking for comfort. They rented some medical equipment for us to use in the home, and they were always one step ahead of us, so they knew what to expect next. We didn't at first. But Dad's mobility was changing fast, and they got the medical equipment in our home for when that time came. Hospice set us up to be successful and safe in our environment. They provided so much wonderful education for us that it took away some of that fear, because we always knew what to expect next. This is what you're gonna watch for this week, and this is what this means. We knew that when that change happened, it was a normal part of the process, because our team was coming out and educating us on everything that was happening. But imagine going through this alone without that team. When you're sitting at home and something is happening that's different with your loved one, you call 911, and you go to the hospital. But imagine the hospital setting if you are a repeat hospital visitor. You're gonna be seeing a lot of different nurses and a lot of different doctors, and you're gonna be repeating your story over and over. Probably not getting the same person each visit. That was different with hospice, because our medical team came right to us in the home. And they weren't hired caregivers. They didn't stay with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But the thing that made a difference was they were available by telephone. So if there was something that myself or my brothers were wondering about, all it took was a phone call. And the majority of the time, I was able to talk to our nurse and get the answer that I needed without a visit. But if there was something happening in the home that we were really worried about with Dad, they're always available to come out and make that visit. One time, it was late into the night or early in the morning. Dad had a CAD pump next to him, and that was feeding him morphine. With the morphine, some people are really worried about patients getting this medication, but it's a wonderful medication that we use a lot in hospice. You could start so small, just a mini dose, and then you grow from there, because we want the patients to be awake, able to respond and visit with their family as much as they can. So the morphine helps with pain as well as shortness of breath. If you imagine a fish out of water, that's how it is for a patient who is having trouble catching their breath. And that could be from COPD, it could be from anxiety, it could be from fear. So that morphine is a really good medication to help with that pain and also that shortness of breath. It helps calm the body and the spirit. So this CAD pump that was giving my dad the pain medication started beeping. And I called my nurse and I let her know what was going on, and she showed up. She came, and she rang the doorbell, and when I came to the door and opened it up, all I saw was this figure with the sun coming up behind her. She looked like an angel. I will never forget that moment. And she truly was my angel, someone I'll never forget. But she was able to come in and get that CAD pump working again. Of course, things like that never happen during the day, but in the middle of the night, right? So hospice has a team of experts that work with the family, and this means no more hospital stays, no more clinic appointments. We don't call 911 anymore. Hospice became our 911. We had our own team that came to us in our home. No need for repeating the same story every trip to the hospital with every concern that we had. The hospice team includes the nurse, and that nurse makes a visit to the home at least once a week to check and see how the patient is doing. She checks on the medication to see how the patient is swallowing, adding those comfort meds as needed because things do change from day to day, so the medication really needs to be watched and changed as we go. Again, she taught us how to be caregivers. We were in charge of giving that medication, understanding what the medication was used for, how often, and if he needed medication sooner than the time allowed, I would just talk to the nurse and she would change the order and we would provide that medication as Dad needed it. Again, the education on what to expect next. Every time they were in our home, they taught us something new. The second person on our team is a social worker, and her visit frequency is based on the needs of the family. So it could be once a week, it could be once a month, or it could be declined. But that social worker helped us work through what was needed for important documents, and one would be the advance directives. With the advance directives, you have the power of attorney for healthcare, and then you have the power of attorney for financial. So she was able to walk us through those steps that I had never had any dealings with at all. So she really educated us well on the paperwork that we would need for us to make an appointment with a lawyer to get that taken care of. That social worker also looked at our family needs, and she was able to connect us with any resources that was needed in the community. Some of the supports that are pretty popular would be hiring a caregiver to come into the home to help with any needs. We didn't need to do that because of our big family, but that is a very common need when we're working with hospice. That social worker also provided wonderful emotional support to not only my dad, but to each one of us. All of us handle grief in a different way, and it was so wonderful to have someone who was really knowing of end of life, to have that discussion with her. The third person on the team is the chaplain. Also, the frequency of his visits are based on the family needs and preferences. But Chaplain Dan comes out and he provides such wonderful spiritual support, and it doesn't have to mean that you're religious, but we believe that every person that we encounter believes in something. And whatever that something is, we are there to support them in that belief. If the patient is a member of a church in their community, that chaplain is really helpful by getting them connected with that person, with that chaplain or that pastor in their church. So when I first started hospice, I always wondered, why would we need a chaplain on service? I go to a church, I have my own preacher that I can reach out to, but that wasn't the case for our family. When we reached out to our church, the pastor there was not comfortable with death. And that's okay, because everyone has different talents. Our pastor from our church was so wonderful with the children's programming, did such a great job with that. But he did not visit the bedside when Dad was dying. That's okay, because we were able to get the chaplain from hospice to come out and work with us as a family. I went on a visit one time with the chaplain, and it was also something that I'll never forget. We were sitting in a bedroom of a patient's home, and she was in her hospital bed, and she told us about something that had happened to her. And she said that she was in her hospital bed, alone in her room, and over in the corner of the room, she saw this cloud inside. And this cloud moved very slowly, and it moved gently over her. And once it got over her body, she told us that she felt such a feeling of peace, comfort, and joy. And then the cloud continued moving. Well, I know what that was, and I'm sure all of you know what that was too. But what an amazing moment for that patient. She had no more fear. She knew God was there. Our chaplain is wonderful with singing at the bedside, reading. He prays with the patient and the family. And if they don't want prayer, he's their friend. Our next person on the team is our CNA. And our CNA is able to visit up to 5 days a week to offer comfort through a bed bath if the patient is not able to get to the shower, or she can help with that shower. We do have that equipment. We have the shower chair in there, which makes it a lot easier to help with the hygiene process. But if the patient isn't feeling good on the day that she arrives for the bed bath, she'll offer to just tidy up the home a little bit. Maybe there's a few dishes in the sink that she'll wash up. She'll grab the garbage on her way out. She'll pick up the mail if they're unable to get to the mailbox. She's able to do a gentle massage, lotioning, things that really help in that patient's home and for that patient. So I learned a lot from all of these team members because they all had such different skills. And those different ways of treating the patient helped my dad so much. One night, I was helping get Dad ready for bed. And I was sitting at the foot of the bed and putting lotion on his feet and just giving him a gentle foot massage. And America's Got Talent was on the TV, I remember that. And he said to me, "You took the wrong path." And I didn't understand what he meant by that. And he says, "Well, you take such good care of me that this is something that you should do." And I did. I followed Dad's words. So, with all of this information, you're thinking, this sounds like a great plan, but who can afford all of that care? Does anyone know how hospice can be paid for? Does it come from your checkbook? No. Hospice is paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, or your private health insurance. So you don't pay anything for this care because this is a benefit that you paid into for years and it's there waiting for you when you need it. So what does hospice pay for? It pays for all of those medications that that patient is on that's related to their diagnosis for making them eligible for our hospice program. They also pay for all the comfort medications that that patient needs. The medical equipment, like the commode next to the bed so they don't have to get up to use the bathroom and have a fall. The shower chair, the wheelchair to get out and experience life. We always encourage them to take a field trip. Go look at the fields and see where they're at in their growing process. Do everything that you can before you can't. We pay for briefs and wipes, so that cost can be taken off of the list. It pays for the team of end-of-life experts that come in and help with those supports. We have what we call respite care also. For patients who are living in the home, if something happens to their caregiver, we pay for that patient to go into a nursing home for up to 5 days for that caregiver to recover, or if they have a wedding or a funeral out of state that they need to attend, or if it's just caregiver burnout, we pay for that patient to be in that facility so that the caregiver can just have some time to recover. During that time when the patient is in the nursing home, we make all of our visits there to make sure that everything's going okay. Medication-wise, spiritually, physically, socially, we make sure that everything's going well with that visit. After the 5 days are done, then that patient goes back home and receives care from his caregiver and family. Hospice also pays for the on-call option because we always need a nurse who's on call if we get those questions in the middle of the night, or if we have a death that we need to go to and get them ready for the funeral home. It pays for catheter care and supplies. Sometimes it's not very safe for that patient to get up and to get to the bathroom. So talking about having a catheter keeps them in the bed and less worry about those falls. And lastly, we have the bereavement support for when that patient passes away. There's a lot of firsts that come after that patient dies. So we follow the family for 13 months, taking care of all of those firsts. And we do it in ways that that have been shared with us how they want to be notified. Some people like to have a group to go to talk about their concerns and learn from others and how they made it through this experience. Others don't like the group and they like the one-on-one with the bereavement specialist, so we offer that as well. Another thing that we found was very popular is sending out the newsletters for topics that are happening during that month and what you might be experiencing that month. Just a little something for you to read at home. You don't have to have any contact with anyone, but it's helping you through noticing that what I'm feeling is normal. other people feel this way too. So there's a lot of different ways that we can provide that support. Another way is for children, they have a grief day where the children go to like a camp, and we found that doing crafts with children really helps them get through that grief that they're experiencing, because they're not so focused on eye-to-eye contact. They're working with an activity and talking about what happened to them in their home with the loss of their loved one. So, how do we even begin to get associated with a hospice program? The first thing is a referral. What we ask is if you have a question about one of your family members or spouses, to please call our 1-800 number. And you'll find that number on the material on that table over there. And how that can be done is they'll ask you questions about your spouse or your family member. They'll get all the information from you, and then they'll call the doctor who the patient has been seeing, their primary care doctor. From there, we get all the medical records to review the medical records to make sure that they are eligible for our hospice program. And what that means is if the doctor feels like this patient could pass within 6 months, then they approve hospice to begin their support. It doesn't mean that if that patient is on for 6 months, now we discharge. That's not what that means. We've had patients on service for over 2 years, sometimes 3 years. So as long as we can prove to Medicare that there's a decline happening with that patient could stay on our services. We also offer same-day visits, and this is something that is kind of unheard of in the hospice world. If you call us, we're gonna come visit you that same day, because we know how hard it is to say yes to hospice. And once we get that yes, we want to get out there as soon as possible to provide that care and comfort to your loved one. So when to call hospice? Sooner rather than later, because we want to come out there and get to know that patient, to know what the baseline is for that patient so we can recognize those declines. We're going to change from cure to comfort. And we want to build that relationship of trust with the family member and the patient. Our family knew our team so well. It was such a joy to have them in our house. Eligibility for the program, that would include all of those terrible diseases like cancer, heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, lung disease, Parkinson's, ALS, dementia, stroke, MS, COPD. All of those will get you into an eligibility for hospice. We do have specific brochures according to the disease back on that table. If you know someone who's experiencing one of those, feel free to take one of those brochures to just learn a little bit more about how hospice can help with those. So I talked about how a patient can stay on our program for longer than 6 months, but they can also graduate off of our program. When I worked for Hearts in Action in Fargo, that's where I started my career with them. We found that sometimes when we were going into the patient's home, that patient really did great. The reason for that was we found that they weren't taking their medications right. Eating, they were not able to cook anymore, so they weren't associated with any Meals on Wheels or neighborhood programs. So our social worker really helped with those supports, and the patient starts to do so much better that now we need to look at graduating from hospice. And that's really hard because after you work with a family and patient for so long, they begin to feel like friends. They're your family. It's hard to say goodbye. And when we do graduate, all the equipment comes with us. So it's a really hard thing to graduate, even though it's a joy to have them graduate off of our service. It's hard to say goodbye. However, if we do graduate a patient off of hospice and they start to have those declines again, we can go back in and reevaluate. They already know our team, so they're very good about calling us back and saying, how about now? How about now? This is happening now. Can you come out and just see? And we do that. So what if you changed your mind? What if you had hospice coming out and all of a sudden, this isn't what you expected, this isn't what you signed up for? You can discharge at any time. You're not bound to be on hospice till end of life. We don't have that happen normally. Usually once we start with a patient and family, that relationship just grows and we stay on to support through end of life. So, end of life in hospice. My dad passed away 2 months after the date of his diagnosis. My family was so thankful for all that hospice was able to share with us. Without the hospice support, my dad would probably have spent his last days in a hospital room, hooked up to machines and limited visitors because of the space. I've been in those hospital rooms and there's 2 chairs in there. Instead, we look back on that time with love, a family coming together and working their schedules together and providing the best that we could during such a difficult time in our life. On July 25th of 2029, Dad's journey was getting close to an end. And you ask how I knew that? It was because of hospice. Dad was non-responsive, and we recognized the change in his breathing pattern. Things were different. This is what we read about. This is what hospice told us about. I'm confident that Dad felt the love of our family as we surrounded his bed. With the Bible in our hands, we each took a turn reading from one of his favorite scriptures, Psalm 23. Dad took his last breath when that reading was complete. What hospice did for us was transformed a difficult time into a journey of comfort, peace, and dignity. This journey led me down a different path. As I left behind my role with working with children, and I accepted a position with Hospice of the Red River Valley as our volunteer coordinator. Couldn't believe my luck. Dad told me that I had followed the wrong path, and due to his illness, he showed me the right path. My first day at Hospice of the Red River Valley, we had orientation, and during orientation, one of the speakers said, you will find that working in hospice is not just a job, it's a calling. And they couldn't have been more spot on. This is my walk and my calling. And I encourage all of you to just get more information if you need it. You are not tied in to hospice. If it's not something that you want in your home, that's okay. But it was a wonderful experience for my family and my dad. And I encourage any questions that you have going forward. Yes.
What area you cover?
Oh, okay. So we have a large area that we cover, 66 counties. We have 10 offices throughout our service area, and we have a map on the back table. You'll see different colors on the map, and what that shows is the hospice team that's working in that area. So my team is the pink team, and we are from Minot, and we don't have a we don't serve based on how far you are from the Minot area. We are very passionate about serving the rural areas. We're passionate about going where no one else goes. So our two newest towns that we have in our area are Stanley and Kenmare, and then we also have Mohall and Sherwood. That's the edge of our service area for the west. We serve all the way to Grand Forks, to Fargo, to Bismarck, to Minot and beyond. It is our plan to continue to go west so that we serve more. We actually just had a patient come on our service from Newtown. So Newtown is in our stretch area. On the map, you'll see the area on the west side is gray, and we call that our stretch area. We encourage those in our stretch area to call and just see if we're able to take a patient from their area. Because due to census, which is how many people we have on service at that time, and also due to staffing, we might be able to come out and help you. So I encourage you to look at the map, and it's impressive, the areas that we go to. Any other questions?
Do you find you service all ages of clientele, or do you have a specific age group that you see more of? I'm guessing maybe your older population, but.
Yes. It's terrible to see. We've had a lot of younger folks that we've been serving recently, in between 40 to 55. We've been seeing a lot of that. The majority of our patients are of the older generations, but we are trained and accept pediatrics as well. We have not treated a pediatric on our service in the pink area, but I know that we have in the other colored territories. Any other questions?
I don't want to impose, but I'm gonna impose all the same. And just, I'd like to share a little bit from the viewpoint of the Christian conscience and get your take on this. I have known a lot of Christians, including Christian pastors, who are very suspicious of hospice because they believe that hospice is aimed toward hastening the end of life. And nothing that you have shared here leaves any hint of a suggestion that hospice is aimed toward the hastening of the end of life. And throughout my ministry, I have worked with a lot of folks who are benefiting from hospice, and I have never witnessed anything that suggests that we are hastening the end of life, particularly with the ceasing of extraordinary measures to prolong life and with the administration of pain management medication. I think a lot of Christians can mistake that for hastening the end of life. But it is important to remember a distinction between extraordinary interventions intended to prolong earthly life versus necessary caregiving. So if you have to pull your loved one off a ventilator or cease radical chemotherapy or radiation interventions and transition to palliative care, comfort measures, that does not mean you are giving up, and it doesn't mean you are aiming toward death. It means you're shifting focus to caregiving rather than attempting to address an uncomfortable illness. And with pain medication, a lot of times when you start administering effective pain medication, there can be a big change. You're no longer struggling for survival. Now you can breathe a sigh of relief. And I think a lot of folks mistake that for we're killing our loved one, when in fact you're giving your loved one the first peace they've had for a long time, and giving an opportunity to that loved one and to friends and family to work on processing the approaching loss rather than fighting for survival. So I just want to make sure that Christians can approach hospice care with a good conscience and know that this is warranted caregiving at this stage in life. It is not a hastening of the end of life. And I would I'm sorry to jump on here and take all this, but I would love to get your perspective on anything that I've just brought up here.
Yes, thank you. So, we have had families who have really questioned the use of medication with their loved one. And what comes to mind for me is their dissatisfaction once the pain has been controlled and the patient is now resting comfortably. Sometimes it's believed that we are over-medicating the patient because they're sleeping now. But what we are really seeing with that medication is that it's the first time that the patient is able to have that restful sleep. And you know how sleep is when you're in pain? It's not restful. So you're lacking a lot of the sleep that you need during that time in your life. So we try to encourage them to accept the comfort medication so that that patient can be at peace, and do a lot of teaching on the amounts that we are giving to the patient. And we can always back off of the amounts that we're giving, but really we're starting from the smallest dose and then moving up with it to try to find that wonderful balance between comfort and a wakefulness to be present with the family. We want the rest of their time on this earth to be filled with family memories, and we want them to feel as good as they can. So with the medication, with the team coming out for education, it's just such a wonderful program of support in so many different ways. We are looking for volunteers to provide that companionship to the patient in your area here in Bottineau. We have served quite a few from your area, and it would be lovely to have someone who's interested in going in to provide that companionship visit to our patient. How that works is if you're a companion, you would go in to visit your patient once a week, and it could be 20 minutes, half hour, an hour, just based on how that patient is doing that day. So things that you could do with a patient would be playing cards, doing puzzles, singing, if you have a musical talent, playing your instrument at the bedside for them and their family, going for coffee or a wheelchair adventure with the nicer weather. I think that it's coming back, I'm not sure, but there's so many wonderful things. When I was a volunteer coordinator, I learned so many amazing connections through our volunteer program. And one of them was a college student who was matched with her patient, and through talking, they learned that they both loved books. So she brought in the book called The Notebook. If you're aware of that, it's a movie as well. And what she would do is she would read one chapter each week, and then they'd finish the book. And the patient absolutely loved this time with her volunteer and loved this story. So once they finished that book, she brought in the movie, and they sat and watched the movie together. That was one experience that will stay with me. Another one was a gentleman who I had him sign up for like a handyman in the home, just to do those simple fixes. I had a couple who was going through hospice. It was the husband, and he really needed to get into a hospital bed. And sometimes patients have a hard time laying flat on their bed because of breathing. So trying to use the pillows to move up the head of his bed so he could breathe better wasn't working for them. So we encouraged them to get a hospital bed. That meant that wife had to give up their marriage bed. She had slept by his side every night of their life, and now she was gonna have to sleep in a different bed without him. So I called up my volunteer Gary. I said, we have an emergency delivery that we need to make for this hospital bed. It needs to be done today, but we need you to take down the bed that's in there right now. So Gary went in there, and not only did he bring his wrench, tools, whatever is needed, and got that bed out of there, but he listened to that wife and the grief that she shared about not being able to sleep in the bed with her husband anymore. That was important to her. Not just him moving the bed, but him listening to her. Amazing connections are made through our volunteer program. So if you can find it in your heart to become one of our volunteers, we would just love to have you on our team. And I do have information over there about our volunteer program. All you would have to do is fill out a volunteer application. There's different opportunities available, either the companionship, or if you are a sewer, we have a bear over there that I sewed out of one of my shirts. When the patient does pass away, we offer to make free of charge up to 2 bears per patient's family. Maybe it would be a shirt that they loved him in. Maybe it was a pillowcase. We had an Elvis pillowcase one time that we made a bear out of. Maybe it was some of those sleepy pants that the patient liked to sleep in. We would love to welcome you aboard to sew some of these bears, because you can't imagine the joy from the surviving spouse to receive these bears after that patient has passed away. So, any other questions about hospice?
That was going to be my question about volunteering.
Oh,
Do you
good.
need to be a nurse?
No.
You don't?
No.
I've always wanted to do it.
Oh, yes. I had, I had someone in Fargo that I knew pretty well, and I told her that she would be a wonderful volunteer for our program. And she said, but Kristi, I don't know anything medical. What if I'm in there and the patient starts bleeding out of his ears and out of his eyes? And I said, what if you weren't there?
Right.
You know, you could go out and get someone in that nursing home to come in and get him help right away. But if you're not there, he's just in there by himself, and what would happen then? So no medical background is needed to be a volunteer. Volunteers do not have hands-on care. They don't transfer the patient. They don't help the patient go to the bathroom. They don't help him out of bed. They don't give him pills. They are there for companionship.
Do you have any type of training or class for volunteers, or a support group or something of that nature?
We do, so we have a training that's about 2.5 hours long that we go through end of life, so that you're able to see those declines as well, to know where they're at in their process. So we do a background check, a fingerprint check, TB, we check TB, and we do the training, and then you're a volunteer. If you're a sewer, you don't need to go through the training, but we provide everything that you would need to make that bear. You would have to fill out a volunteer application to get involved in that program. Anything else? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.